Welcome to Headstones and Microphones, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched, first-person simulation of history's most interesting people. I am your host, Calvin. While we've added some creative storytelling, our goal is to inspire your own study of these fascinating lives. Now, let's meet our guest. Arthur, it is an absolute honor to have you here on the podcast. For those who may somehow not know who you are, who are you?
To answer your question, I'm Arthur Ashe. Most people know me as a professional tennis player who had the incredible privilege of winning Wimbledon, the US Open, and the Australian Open. But beyond the court, I always considered myself a student, an activist, and someone who tried to use his platform to serve others and advocate for civil rights and health equity.
That is an incredible legacy. Let's take it all the way back to the beginning. When and where were you born?
I was born on July 10th, 1943, right in the heart of Richmond, Virginia.
What was your given name at birth?
My birth name was Arthur Robert Ashe Jr., named right after my father, Arthur Robert Ashe Sr.
Is there a story behind your birth name?
Well, it was a proud family tradition. Carrying my father's name meant a lot to him, and it gave me a strong sense of identity right from the start. Our ancestry actually traces back to a woman named Lamar who was brought to America on a slave ship, so keeping our family name strong and moving forward through the generations meant everything to us.
That adds so much depth to your name. What was your hometown like growing up?
Growing up in Richmond during the 1940s and 50s meant living in a strictly segregated South. Everything from the schools to the playgrounds was separated by race. It could be very restrictive, but the black community there was incredibly tight-knit, resilient, and supportive. We looked out for one another.
What was your family life like?
It was full of love, but we also faced some heavy heartaches. My mother, Maddie, passed away very suddenly from a stroke when I was only 6 years old. It was a massive blow. My father was left to raise my brother John and me all by himself. He was a strict, hardworking, and deeply protective man. He worked as a supervisor for the Brookfield playground, which actually turned out to be a massive blessing for my life.
Since you lived right where your dad worked, what kind of kid were you?
Oh, I was a total bookworm and a bit of a scrawny kid. I loved reading and kept my nose in my school books, which helped me maintain straight A's. But because we lived right on the 18-acre grounds of the Brookfield Park, which was Richmond's largest park for black residents, I also spent every spare second running around playing sports and eventually picking up a tennis racket at age 6.
What were your biggest fears growing up?
Growing up under Jim Crow laws, my biggest fear was making a mistake or being in the wrong place at the wrong time in a segregated society where the consequences for black folks could be severe. My father drilled into us a strict sense of behavior and manners because he feared for our safety. I carried that discipline with me everywhere.
What did you dream of becoming as a child?
Because I love books so much, I initially dreamed of doing something academic or going into business. Tennis started out as just something fun to do in the park. I didn't even realize it could become a career until much later.
What were some of your favorite activities in school?
I absolutely loved my studies, especially history and writing. I was quite proud to graduate first in my high school class. Outside of the classroom, I played whatever sports I could, but tennis quickly took over my schedule.
What was your first job?
My very first job was helping my dad maintain the Brookfield playground. I'd help clean up, line the fields, and take care of the grounds. It taught me the value of hard work early on.
Was there a moment where you realized you were different from everyone else?
It became very clear when I started playing in junior tennis tournaments. I noticed that I was often the only black face on the courts, and I wasn't allowed to compete against white children in Richmond or use the indoor courts during the winter. It made me realize that my journey was going to require twice the effort just to get my foot in the door.
What's a decision that changed everything for you, but felt small at the time?
Accepting an offer to leave Richmond before my senior year of high school to move to St. Louis, Missouri. It felt like a tough, scary move to leave my family, but it allowed me to train indoors, play against a wider variety of opponents, and attend Sumner High School. That single move opened up the doors to the rest of my life.
What was your biggest break?
That would be receiving a full tennis scholarship to the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. Going out to California gave me access to one of the best tennis programs in the country, and it truly launched me onto the national and international stage.
What were your biggest struggles before success?
the lack of access to facilities, and the constant travel. Because of segregation, I had to travel long distances just to find integrated tournaments that would accept me. Dealing with the emotional weight of being excluded from clubs and tournaments because of my skin color was a heavy burden for a young guy.
Did you ever consider quitting?
I never wanted to quit tennis entirely because I loved the game too much, but there were definitely times when the racial barriers and the loneliness of being the only one made me feel incredibly frustrated. Thankfully, my coach, Dr. R. Walter Johnson, and my father kept me grounded and focused on the bigger picture.
Were there any specific daily habits or routines that you feel are essential to your success?
An ironclad sense of self-discipline and emotional control. On the court, I made it a strict habit never to argue with line calls, never to throw my racket, and always to maintain a calm, cool demeanor. I felt that showing any negative emotion would give my opponents an edge and would be used by critics to stereotype me.
What job would you have had if fame never happened?
Given my degree from UCLA, I most likely would have gone into corporate business administration or perhaps stayed in the military, as I served as a first lieutenant in the U.S. Army at West Point in the late 1960s.
What was your life like before fame?
It was very quiet and orderly. I spent my time studying, practicing on the public courts, listening to my father's advice, and reading as many books as I could get my hands on.
How did relationships change after success?
Success definitely brought a lot of new people into my circle, and suddenly everyone wanted a piece of my time, but it also deepened my bonds with fellow activists and friends who cared about the same social causes I did. I always tried to stay grounded and remember who was there for me before the trophies.
Did fame bring happiness?
Trophies and fame bring a wonderful sense of temporary satisfaction and achievement, but true lasting happiness for me came from my marriage to my beautiful wife Jean, our daughter Camera, and knowing I was using my voice to help people who couldn't speak for themselves.
What was the downside of becoming famous?
The complete loss of privacy. Suddenly, your personal life and your health become public property for everyone to debate and comment on.
What misconceptions did people have about you?
Early on, some people thought my calm, quiet demeanor on the court meant that I didn't care about the civil rights struggle or that I was being too passive. They didn't realize that my composure was my chosen strategy. It was my way of breaking down barriers without giving anyone an excuse to shut me out.
What was your darkest moment?
One of the toughest moments was in 1969 when the South African government denied me a visa to play in the South African Open because of their apartheid policies. It was a blatant, painful reminder of the global reach of racism, though it ultimately fueled my fire to fight against apartheid even harder.
What past regrets did you carry that you spoke about?
I sometimes expressed a bit of regret that I hadn't spoken out even sooner or more aggressively on certain civil rights issues during the absolute height of the 1960s movement, as I was focused on establishing my tennis career and serving in the military at the time.
What's something people misunderstood about your life?
People often thought that tennis was the most important thing to me. I always said that I didn't want to be remembered just for my tennis accomplishments. Tennis was a wonderful platform, but the work I did for education, public health, and human rights was what truly mattered to me.
Tell me about a time when everything went wrong, and how did you handle it?
In 1979, right in the middle of a healthy, active life, I suffered a major heart attack that required a quadruple bypass surgery. It completely ended my competitive tennis career overnight. It was a massive shock, but I handled it by pivoting. I realized my playing days were over, so I poured my energy into writing, coaching the U.S. Davis Cup team, and advocating for heart health.
Did fame and fortune change your life?
It completely changed my lifestyle and gave me incredible opportunities to travel the world, meet global leaders like Nelson Mandela, and live comfortably. But it never changed my core values of humility, service, and hard work that my father taught me in Richmond.
What personal battles were you fighting privately?
My health was a major private battle. After a second heart surgery in 1983, I contracted HIV from a blood transfusion, long before the blood supply was routinely tested for the virus. My family and I kept that battle entirely private for several years to protect our young daughter and maintain our privacy.
Who had the biggest influence on your life?
Without a doubt, my father, Arthur Ashe Sr. He taught me discipline, manners, and the importance of integrity. Professionally, my coach, Dr. R. Walter Johnson, who also trained the great Althea Gibson, had a massive impact on shaping me into the player and man I became.
What was life like in your final years?
They were incredibly busy, fulfilling, and focused on service. Once my health status became public in 1992, I hit the ground running to make every moment count. I spent my time writing my memoir, giving speeches, and establishing foundations to help others.
What were you working on in your career before you passed away?
I was tirelessly working on raising awareness for HIV/AIDS to break the stigma surrounding the disease. I founded the Arthur Ashe Foundation for the Defeat of AIDS and the Arthur Ashe Institute for Urban Health to address health disparities in minority communities. I even gave a speech on the floor of the United Nations General Assembly on World AIDS Day in December 1992.
When and where and how did you pass away, and how old were you?
I passed away on February 6, 1993, at New York Hospital in New York City due to AIDS-related pneumonia. I was 49 years old.
What's a random fact about you most people have never heard?
I was a huge fan of landscaping and architecture. Because of my dad's work in the park, I always had a deep appreciation for how grounds and buildings were designed and maintained.
What's the craziest rumor ever told about you?
During my playing days, because I was so quiet and composed, some rumors circulated that I was completely cold, robotic, and lacked any real passion for the game or for people. Anyone who knew me off the court knew I had plenty of fire and warmth.
What was your most unique habit?
I had a habit of being an absolute stickler for punctuality. If you weren't 5 minutes early, to me, you were late. I think that came from my military days and my father's strict upbringing.
What was your favorite food?
I always had a weakness for a good classic Southern meal, especially fried chicken, collard greens, and sweet potato pie. It tasted like home.
Did you have a favorite restaurant?
I didn't have one specific favorite restaurant, but during my college days at UCLA and later living in New York, I loved visiting local, quiet diners and soul food spots where I could get a good home-cooked meal without a fuss.
What was your favorite book?
I read so many, but I always found myself returning to historical biographies and political philosophy. Books about Abraham Lincoln and the struggles of Frederick Douglass were always close to my heart.
Did you have any known rivalries?
On the court, I had fantastic, fierce battles with players like Jimmy Connors, Rod Laver, and Stan Smith. They were intense rivalries, but built on a foundation of mutual respect.
Tell us a story nobody talks about.
In 1992, not long before my passing, I was actually arrested outside the White House. I was participating in a protest in support of Haitian refugees who were being detained. People remember me for tennis, but getting handcuffed for standing up for human rights was just as central to who I was.
What's your funniest behind-the-scenes moment?
When I won Wimbledon in 1975, I completely shocked the world by beating Jimmy Connors. At the traditional champions dinner, I had to dance with the women's champion, Billie Jean King. Let's just say my footwork on the tennis court was a lot better than my footwork on the ballroom dance floor, and we shared a magnificent laugh over my clumsy dancing.
Did you ever prank someone?
I was usually the straight man, but during Davis Cup trips with the guys, I'd occasionally short sheet my teammates' beds or hide their tennis rackets right before practice just to see them sweat for a minute.
What was the most outlandish purchase you made?
I was always very frugal with my money, but after my big wins, I treated myself to a beautiful, high-quality camera equipment set. I love photography and capturing the places I traveled to.
What advice would you give people chasing success?
I would tell them what I always believed. Start where you are. Use what you have. Do what you can. True heroism and success are not about surpassing everyone else at all costs, but about the urge to serve others at whatever cost.
Arthur, do you have any closing remarks about this interview or the stories you shared that you would like to share with our listeners before we sign off?
I just want to say how grateful I am to have had this moment to share my journey with you, Calvin. To the listeners, I hope my story reminds you that no matter what barriers are in front of you, you can face them with dignity, grace, and a commitment to making the world a little better than you found it. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
What an absolute class act. Today we got to hear from the legendary Arthur Ashe about his journey from the segregated courts of Richmond to the heights of Wimbledon, his battles on and off the court, and his incredible transition into a global champion for human rights and public health. Arthur, thank you again for coming on the show. And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, legends may die, but their stories never do. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.